So I bought a manual with my Patreon money. FM 1747, the Air Cavalry Combat Brigade. But it won't come for like 2 months. This video isn't going to be a deep dive into the history of the concept because I want to wait on that manual, but I do want to talk briefly about the brigade's role, organization, and some ways of task organizing for combat when it went from experimental to permanent in the mid-1970s. To give an abridged timeline, in 1962, the Howze Board released its final report on how the US Army should integrate aviation into its force. This report was very ambitious. Among other things, it called for the creation of 5 air assault divisions with over 450 aircraft. Of course, the most air assault or air mobile divisions the Army had at any one time was 2 briefly from 1969 to 1971, and just 1 for the rest of history. But the Howze Board also recommended creating 3 air cavalry combat brigades. The board described this brigade as an air fighting unit which destroys or punishes the enemy by aerial maneuver, surprise, and heavy application of firepower delivered from rotary wing light attack helicopters, and by air-delivered riflemen and tank killer teams. The focus was on destroying or neutralizing enemy armor and mechanized forces with a lesser emphasis on soft targets when equipped with anti-personnel weapons. As the brigade also had reconnaissance elements to find the enemy, it was also able to conduct reconnaissance and certain defensive security missions like a screen. Their air mobility was expected as the result of war games to reduce the time to bring up a mobile anti-tank reserve by 25%. You could perhaps compare their broad doctrinal role to the US tank destroyer units of World War II. Like the observation helicopters who found the enemy for the attack helicopters who killed them, tank destroyer units had organic jeep and armored car scouts to do the same. Superior mobility characteristics were also a selling point of tank destroyers, and pursuit by fire was a prescribed method of employment, similar to the attack helicopters' employment in attack by fire, delay by fire, and defend by fire, as opposed to seizing and holding terrain. Although the AirCav Combat Brigade's reconnaissance and security roles in support of a higher headquarters would be out of scope for a tank destroyer battalion. I'd also like to note that in the 1970s and 80s, the US Army's unit icon for attack helicopters was Aviation plus Armor, as opposed to today where they just use a letter A to signify the helicopter type. This was the result of a shift in the Army's mindset on attack helicopters. From units mainly for delivering rocket fire in close support of ground troops or other helicopters, to units that could also maneuver independently and deliver anti-tank fire in service of a higher level objective. Fire support versus operational fires. This was clearly demonstrated by the fact that during Vietnam, the largest concentration of attack helicopters and Huey gunships was in the aerial rocket artillery battalions, which were subordinate to the Air Mobile Division Artillery, led by artillery professionals and dedicated to delivering rocket fire as artillery. And attack helicopter battalions and air mobile divisions were mainly focused on providing security to air assaults. Those missions were oriented around the supported unit and their task, while the post-Vietnam attack helicopter mission statements were more oriented on the enemy and the ability to be decisive units that conduct fire and maneuver. Simmons' paper on attack helicopter doctrine references the Armor School's influence on the development of aviation doctrine post-Vietnam. Attack helicopters needed the ability to react independently and penetrate and maneuver through the attacking army to find tank reserves. However, because attack helicopters can't do certain things that tanks can, like close with the enemy, seize ground, etc., I'd hesitate to go as far to call the AirCav Combat Brigade a flying tank brigade. The AirCav combat concept was not put into action immediately, however. It was tested as part of the 1st Cavalry from 1971 to 1975 as part of the Triple Capability Experiment, where the division had air mobile infantry, armor, and the AirCav Combat Brigade. The division concept itself didn't go anywhere, but the ACCB was successful and spun off into its own independent formation, the 6th Cavalry Brigade under Corps Command. At that time, it included a headquarters and headquarters troop, 2 attack helicopter battalions, 1 air cavalry squadron, 1 support battalion, a signal company, attached a medical company that would be opconned to the support battalion, and an attached admin company. The AirCav Squadron was the hunter in the hunter-killer team. I have a full video on these types of formations on the main channel, but in 1977 it included an HQ and HQ troop and 3 Cav troops. Each troop had a troop HQ with a UH-1 Huey, a flight operations section, an aero weapons platoon with 5 AH-1 Golf and 4 AH-1 Sierra attack helicopters split into 2 sections, the difference being that the Sierra could use the wire-guided TOW missile. An aero scout platoon with 10 OH-58 Alpha Kiowa observation helicopters, an aero rifle platoon with 4 dismounted reconnaissance squads and 5 Huey utility helicopters, and lastly, a service platoon. Meanwhile, the attack helicopter battalions were the killers. They included an HQ and HQ company and 3 attack helicopter companies. They had an HQ, flight operations section, 3 attack helicopter platoons, a scout helicopter platoon, and a service platoon. Unlike the AirCav troops' air weapons platoon, the attack helicopter platoons were equipped with 7 of the AH-1 Sierra helicopter split into 2 unequal sections, all capable of using the TOW missile. You'll find historically, dedicated attack helicopter formations have gotten first dibs on new attack helicopters over air cavalry squadrons. That also applied to the AH-64 Apaches in the 1980s. The Scout Platoon, meanwhile, included 3 sections of 4 Kiowa Scout helicopters. Doctrinally, it was encouraged to mass all 9 platoons of a battalion at a single point against a singular enemy, ideally the enemy's main effort. One option the company commander had at his disposal was to form mixed teams for combat, consisting of 1 scout section and 1 attack platoon, allowing for 1/3 of the company on station, 1/3 en route, and 1/3 being refueled and rearmed at a FARP. This type of rotation allowed for continuous fire on the enemy. Operating in this way also prevents the entire company from getting decisively engaged and getting stuck. 2 or 3 teams forward were also possible if maximum destruction in a short time frame was necessary, but it provided less sustainable coverage. Alternatively, the scout section could be employed separately from the attack helicopters. This allowed for the scouts to remain in constant contact with the enemy while attack helicopters cycled, as the Cobras often expended their ammunition quickly. The big picture difference between the scouts in the ACCB's Air Squadron and those in the attack helicopter battalions was that the Air Squadron fulfilled a dedicated reconnaissance and security mission for the Corps commander. They could screen well in front, while the scouts in the attack helicopter battalions fulfilled a specific recon and target acquisition role for their paired Cobras. The attack battalions were capable of reconnaissance as well, but as a secondary role.
For the Cobra, the scout's ability to search out the enemy translates into almost immediate target handover, as the Cobra can then use its airborne laser tracker to hone in on the target and destroy it.
Certain security missions were inherent to the Cobras though, like acting as a covering force to disrupt or destroy the enemy. A covering force often seeks to become decisively engaged. A decisive engagement is basically a battle that has to be fought to its final conclusion. A decisively engaged force has generally been fully committed and doesn't have the freedom of maneuver to withdraw or reposition itself. So it either has to win, lose, or be extricated by an outside friendly force. This differs from a screen, which does destroy or repel enemy forces when possible, but is more about providing early warning and a defensive nature. A screening force generally seeks to remain in contact with the enemy, but retains freedom of maneuver and does not become decisively engaged. On the other hand, the difference between the Cobras and the AirCav troops and those in attack helicopter companies was the former were meant to support the reconnaissance and security effort first and foremost. The troop could attack, but not sustain a sizable attack. By the rule of 3, the whole squadron, the size of a battalion, was probably capable of sustaining only a platoon's worth of Cobras in the field continuously. With normal operation as part of an AirCav troop and scout weapon teams, it would actually be smaller elements more spread out. Each attack helicopter company meanwhile could sustain a platoon-sized attack indefinitely through rotation. With some math, you can figure the brigade's 2 attack helicopter battalions were thus capable of sustaining 6 platoon-sized attacks continuously, and even more if time gaps between attacks were acceptable. If you want more AirCav content, check out this video on the 60-year evolution of AirCav squadrons. I'll see you over there.